Hello, this is Pastor Rick, and I want to welcome you to Lectionary Plus to prepare you for worship for this Sunday, February the 8th. And we have three texts, Matthew 5, 13 to 6, 12 to 20. This is about the Sermon on the Mount. We're continuing the focus on the Sermon on the Mount from last week when we had the Beatitudes. We also have Isaiah 58 and 1 Corinthians 2, 1 to 5, and then 6 to 10. Now, let's start with the Sermon on the Mount. This is one of the most powerful sermons that we have in Scripture, the most famous by Jesus, the longest that we have. And so we're going to continue that with the emphasis on two very powerful missional themes where the Lord calls his disciples to be salt and light. And that's incredibly interesting because here the Christians are being oppressed by the Roman power, the Roman Empire. They're being taxed to death. They're hungry. They're oppressed. And so you'd think, okay, we're going to just rally. We'll rally the troops. It's about survival. And Jesus says, no, it's not about survival. It's about mission. You're to be salt and light. Salt, giving something the world taste, and actually to preserve things in the world as well. So it's a powerful word of mission, as well as to be light, to cast a light, to make things transparent, to add guidance, the light on our path. And what's fascinating here, as any reader of the New Testament at that time, Rome was considered a light to the world. Cicero called the Roman Empire the light to the world. So here you have two contrasts, two lights, so to speak, at war with each other, or at least in competition. The light that Jesus is promising and calling his disciples to, as well as the Roman Empire. As we continue with this reading on verses 17 to 20, it's interesting that Jesus talks about Scripture here. There's four things he says, and I think we should consider these four things as we compare them to the upper section on light and salt, salt and light. One, he says, I'm going to fulfill the Scriptures. Don't think I'm starting over. This mission is not like I'm making it up from scratch. I'm going back to Scripture and fulfilling them. Scripture has to be validated. It's authoritative, and I'm abiding by Scripture. Then there's kind of a warning to teachers who abandon Scripture. And then finally, he encourages his disciple to live according to Scripture. The righteous, those disciples who follow him, their righteousness will be greater than the scribes and the Pharisees. All right, so that's Sermon on the Mount, what will be the small section we'll be dealing with on Sunday. Isaiah 58, this is, some call it second or third Isaiah. It's post-exilic. So what that means is Israel has already been punished for its sins by, first of all, the Assyrian conquest, and then later about the Babylonian conquest. And now Israel has come back. They've reestablished Jerusalem. They built a wall and a temple. And guess what? Have they learned anything from these adventures? Have they learned from their mistakes? Have they learned from what it means to be punished by God because they did not fulfill the covenant? And of course, the answer is no. And so now the elites, the leadership of Israel is falling into the same problems. And here Isaiah says, you have the power, the leaders here of the temple and of the government, to liberate the oppressed, to feed the hungry, to house the poor, to clothe the naked. You've got the power to do all that, and you're doing just the opposite. So here we can kind of compare this to the Sermon on the Mount, where we have Rome as the oppressor. Here it's internal. The prophet is speaking about Israel's own leadership. And our final text is 1 Corinthians 2, 1 to 5 and 6 to 10. This is a beautiful text by Paul, where he talks about how he came preaching the gospel. He said, I didn't come with clever words. I didn't come with lofty rhetoric. I came preaching the cross. And this is a wonderful focus. It's very different from our other texts really of Isaiah and Matthew. And yet this is an important one, that here it's not about the wisdom of the world, Paul says, but by the revelation that we receive from God about what Jesus has done for us through cross and resurrection. So this is always like a grounding text, not just for preachers, not just for the worship with Lutherans, but for Christians all over the world. So those are our 3 lectionary readings. And now we want to hear from our preacher this week, Pastor Lilliard, to see what he's going to lift up for his sermon. Pastor Lilliard?
Hi, everybody. It's Pastor Lilliard. So this week will be the second part, or another part, of the Sermon on the Mount. When Jesus preached to the people, this time it comes from the book of Matthew and verses 12 and following. So here's what Jesus says. It seems simple, but it's profound. You are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world. And so what I'm going to talk about on Sunday is, what does it mean that we are the salt and we are the light? How do we season life? How do we make life better? How do we make life feel and taste better? And then how do we help people see goodness and hope in the world? So I'm not going to answer everything right now because I want you to come and worship, but we are salt and we are light, and we'll talk about how we are and how we can be with God's help. In the meantime, be well. God bless.